So this is what they were told by Judge Deborah Nelson. In order to convict of manslaughter by act, it is not necessary for the state to prove that George Zimmerman had an intent to cause death, only an intent to commit an act that was not merely negligent, justified, or excusable, and which caused the death. Goes on to say, if you find George Zimmerman committed manslaughter, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of manslaughter, George Zimmerman, yes.
George, pause there, and we're going to go back to that. Read the line. No. I want you to read the line where you said, what did you say, negligence? Which line did you mark? Justified. Read the justifiable line again.
All right, let me find it here. There's a lot of language to look through. Okay, I'll pick it up there, I'll conclude it, and I'll keep an eye on the court.
Just read the line.
Go
ahead.
Only an intent to commit an act that was not merely negligent, justified, or excusable, and which caused the death.
Okay, hold that, George, and then we'll come right back to you. What were you saying?
No, I'm simply saying that's really the essence of where the jury is going to have to land. Was this justifiable? Was it excusable? Did the state, because there has been self-defense, it's a very small burden for the defense, once they go ahead and show self-defense, he was acting in self-defense, that the state then has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did not do so. And that's the crux of the case. Did the state prove beyond a reasonable doubt that his act was unreasonable in light of all the attendant circumstances? That one line will be the case.
Okay, and did the state prove that?
Well, I think so, and I think that if you go back in the jury instructions and look at second-degree murder, they had to make that determination whether or not second-degree murder was justifiable or excusable. It's at the very, very beginning of the jury instructions. My spidey sense tells me they may be beyond that, and so if they're on manslaughter, they may have already decided that self-defense is not really applicable.
Okay, all right, stand by. George Howell, you still there?
I am, yeah.
Okay, pick it up, and then we'll talk about the next line. What do you have?
Got it, Don. Sure. So the next line, it says, if you find George Zimmerman committed manslaughter, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of manslaughter, George Zimmerman carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a firearm, you should check the appropriate box on the verdict form. So that's the language that this jury was given. That's what they're looking at when it comes to manslaughter. And keep in mind that this definition, these jury instructions, these were brokered specifically, tailored for this case against George Zimmerman, brokered by the attorneys in that charging conference. And then the jury instructions, Judge Deborah Nelson signed off on these instructions, and that's what she told the jury when she sent them off for deliberations.
Okay. Hey, George, do you have with you from the jury instructions where it says manslaughter, to prove the crime of manslaughter, the state must prove the following two elements beyond a reasonable doubt? Do you have that one with you?
Don,
if you look through.
I can get it in a minute if you give me a minute.
That's okay. No worry, I'm not putting you on the spot. I thought if you had it here, we could talk about it, because I know that you have been looking at this. Yeah. So,
a minute, come back to me and I'll have it.
Yeah, no, here's a graphic. Here's a graphic. Put it up. And I want our guys to talk about it here. To prove the crime of manslaughter, the state must prove the following two elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Trayvon Martin is dead. That's number one, right? And then you have said, okay, so we know that, right?
That's been established.
Okay, obviously. Number two, George Zimmerman intentionally committed an act or acts that caused the death of Trayvon Martin.
And he didn't need to intend to kill Trayvon Martin. That's a big distinction, and that's also in the jury instructions. But he had to intend the act. Basically, let me give you an example. Let's say you are accused of manslaughter and you didn't know that the gun had a bullet in, that the gun had bullets, and you accidentally shoot the gun. Well, that's negligent, but that's not intentional. That act wasn't intentional, some would argue. And so this is a different situation. He certainly admitted that he intended to fire the firearm. He intended to shoot because he says that he believed he was going to die, so he had to shoot.
Hold on, George, you still there?
I am.
Is George Howell still with? So, George,
yes.
I'm not sure if you were in the courtroom at that particular point, but I know that you've been reporting on it. So when this whole manslaughter thing came up, you saw that the defense was incredulous. If you were inside the courtroom, if you were watching, what was the mood inside? Did they appear to be taken off guard? Because Sonny is believing that this was, they were being too cute by half, that it was all theater.
Well, initially people assumed that it would be aggravated assault. Turned out they weren't going to use aggravated assault in this case. They decided to use manslaughter. And you'll also remember that prosecutors suggested using third-degree felony murder in the case of child abuse. The defense attorneys, when they heard that, you'll remember Don West, he said, I can't believe that you'd bring this, into the case at this point. Judge Deborah Nelson decided that third-degree felony murder would not be added, as a lesser offense here. They agreed on this charge of manslaughter, and it seems like, that's something that both sides agreed on fine. The judge decided that it was appropriate for this case.
Okay, hang on. George, very good explanation. Thank you. I appreciate you helping us and our viewers to get through that. Do you have an issue with something?
Really, it was almost there, but just so that the viewers fully understand, any side can ask, because it was a Category 1 lesser included. So if either side had asked for a manslaughter, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that the judge was going to grant it. So the defense really didn't want a manslaughter. They knew this could potentially be the default that could get a conviction for the state. So they objected, but I think it was more just to make the record and try to claim to the judge, just like on the ag assault or really on the third-degree murder of a child, that there were no elements brought out during the course of the case. There were plenty of elements brought out by the state, during the course of the case that would suggest that the state brought enough in to allow for a manslaughter conviction. So their effort was just really an effort in futility. They need to make the argument. You got to make your record. You really never know, but that's been a foregone conclusion. They've always known that manslaughter would be a consideration for the jury.
You guys see behind us, Seminole County Courthouse. Very interesting this morning. I ran into all the players going in the courthouse, and they were leaving as I was going in. And what I found, what struck me about everything that I saw, was that George Zimmerman standing in the window, the top floor of the Seminole County Courthouse, looking out onto this courtyard, into the parking lot, at the media, at the demonstrators who had gathered with his family there. And I said, I can't imagine not knowing what my fate is going to be. Granted, he was involved in a crime that resulted in the death of someone,
an alleged crime.
But an incident that ended in death for a young man. Can you imagine?
No. I mean, in the next few hours, a group of strangers is going to determine your fate. You might be spending the rest of your life in prison, or you may simply be walking out, and at least this phase is over. He's got a long way to go before this part of his life is over.
But
no.
Not even a few hours. It could be in a few moments, because she's invited them to take a dinner break until 8:15, and yet they are still deliberating, and that should say something about this. If they do come back within the next few minutes, we're going to bring you live in the courtroom. We're going to continue to go on here as long as that jury is deliberating here on CNN. We're back after a very quick break with live coverage of the George Zimmerman trial.